All right, everyone, welcome to I guess, more like a chat than a panel itself. So just want to give an intro to you guys, who we are. I can start with myself. So my name is Mario, currently working as the data scientist at Goat. Um, a fun fact about all of us, most of us used to be a coworker at Nike. So um, yeah, I'll leave it up to Olive to introduce herself.
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is Olive. I am currently a data scientist at Nike.
Uh,
Hey,
okay,
Henry.
I can go next.
Okay.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin, and I'm an engineer part of the Edison development program at GE Research.
Hi, my name is Henry, and I'm currently a SWE at Amazon.
Cool. So now we got all the intro out of the way. Just want to kind of briefly talk through the purpose of this sort of chat that we are doing. Mainly because we're all quite new in this industry, so just want to talk a little bit about our experience, as well as sort of like a couple tips that we have. So maybe why don't we start with like our background, like how do we get into this industry to begin with? Maybe do you want to start with you, Olive?
Sure. Um, for my background, I think my story resembles a lot of data scientists in the field, where I did not start from a very technical background. I actually studied sociology as an undergrad at Cal, and afterwards I decided to pursue a master's degree with data analytics and also public policy management. And through that track, actually, I gained a lot of experience in manipulating data, data analysis, and also back then it's still data mining as a very popular field, which gradually it now becomes machine learning and also AI. Um, Through there, I find my interest in data science, and then I joined the American Eagle as a web analyst when I first started my data science career.
Cool, that's awesome. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah. So similar to Olive, I also did not come straight from an analytics or machine learning background. I was actually a mechanical engineering student at Georgia Tech. I did a bunch of product development interns and product R&D, and then I joined an auto firm to work as a mechanical and manufacturing engineer. And then I decided to come back to school to get master's of analytics. So that's where I really started learning about data science. And I interned at Nike, hence meeting with all the friends here. And now, after graduation, I now work as a, analytics engineer at GE Research.
Cool. What about you, Henry?
I guess I'm from more of a technical background since I majored in applied math. But I got my bachelor's in applied mathematics from Northwestern, and then I continued my education in master's in analytics at Northwestern as well. And then I interned at Nike this summer with everyone here, and I am now working as a software development engineer at Amazon.
That's awesome. So yeah, about myself, I guess my path is sort of rocky, I guess, in a sense. So I just did my bachelor in industrial engineering. So I guess I was very interested in operation research, and then I guess like how I got introduced to data science. Basically, I did like a research with one of the professor there. Basically did some sort of analytics on fiber, recreating sort of like the structure of the fiber using the matrices and algorithm. So from there, just go on to take the master's in analytics, just like how Kevin did it. Then intern at Nike, actually the same path, and work at Nike afterward. And then now landed at Goat. So yeah, I think the everyone's path seems to be quite different. But overall, I think we all agree that, I think this is quite exciting field. So let's switch gear a little bit in terms of maybe just talk about roughly about like different fields within data science. Like I know when we talk about data science, there are many aspects of things. For example, we do have like experimentation. We have we can say more of a computer vision. We have like natural language processing. There are many different aspects of data science, but like maybe can each of you talk about which area that interests you the most, and then perhaps like what kind of like study you're doing right now to pursue that passion. Maybe we can start with you first, Olive.
Sure. In terms of different fields in data science, I think it's definitely merging between mathematics, computer science, and also traditional statistics. Among them, I would say I have a stronger edge in terms of experimentation and also statistics. Coming from a more social science background, that's where my strong suits are. And for my personal interest, I think there are a lot of up and rising new methods coming from deep learning or traditional artificial intelligence field, for example, reinforcement learning. And these are new applications that I'm very passionate and really interested in finding business applications through this, which still can be challenging in this current development of data science.
What about you, Henry?
I guess for myself, I guess I just recently started a job, so I haven't been up to date on like journals and papers. But I think one area that interests me the most is even within deep learning, graphical neural networks. So I've been really interested in kind of it's been kind of proven in the past that you can represent data very well with graphs using nodes and edges. But I find it very interesting how you can run deep learning algorithms on a graphical representation of data. So
that's awesome. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, so I guess also similar to Olive, I am leveraging some of my background in mechanical engineering and manufacturing in my current role. So AI or ML in industrial application is primarily what I'm interested in. So things like engine maintenance or preventive maintenance is one big thing that now current a lot of engineering companies would like to utilize ML to do so that you can minimize costs that occur from unnecessary maintenance.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think for me, recently I've been quite interested in more of natural language processing space, just because the application, I guess, can be limitless. If you think of it from the business perspective, for example, like Nike, you care about what kind of feedback that the customer gave you in terms of the shoes or sneakers that they bought. And then I think also trying to understand, I guess, from the customer perspective, like how they feel about the brand. Usually you don't get that through just collecting the data from basically like their purchase, their purchase item, how much they paid for, but through like the surveys or through their comments, I think you can get a lot of insight out of it. So maybe I know, like, I think most of the people that's going to be listening to this are most of them will be probably students or those that just wanted to break into this industry. If there's any advice that you guys have on someone that's just started, like if there's any one piece of advice that you can give, what would it be? Like, let's start with you first, Olive.
Sure. I think it's hard to boil down to one single advice, but for I think anyone in college or just even in master's degree, I think what my piece of advice would be like start from learning by doing, and it will be a continuous journey throughout your career that you are still learning. So I would say this data science field is challenging, but it's always pushing you to learn. So like don't stop and think that maybe after getting this master's degree or getting a PhD in statistics, I will be done with learning. or done with having all the skills on my toolbox to apply all the use cases. So rather, it will be an ongoing learning to find new applications, and also like there are so much materials that you can continue learning and equip yourself with this skill set.
That's awesome. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, so kind of on a similar vibe. I think doing a project helps the most. So like classes are very useful to get that foundation, and you certainly need some programming and some statistics to start. But if you just dive in, pick an interesting subject and do a project, or if you're part of a class that you join a practicum type of project class, you will learn a lot throughout the way. So you really you won't know all, if not most, answers. So you just kind of have to search, Google a lot of, I guess, anything from data processing to models, and you learn a lot through that. So I would say, along with learn by doing, pick like a project that interests you and just start it. I mean, sure, you might not get the best results, but you will learn a lot along the way.
Awesome. What about you, Henry?
Okay. I think some of you here might have different opinions, but I personally think that in order to break into data science, you would need a degree, like a master's degree or a PhD degree. I'm not sure how feasible it is to break into data science right now with just a bachelor's. So, yeah.
Awesome. So originally, I wasn't about to speak. I wasn't speaking, trying to say something about this, but I think given that Henry brought this topic up, I also have difference of opinion of his difference of opinion. I know traditionally, like, when you look for a data science job or data scientist or data engineer job, most require you to either have master's or a PhD with some experiences. There are definitely some exception to this case. So for example, if you are undergrad student, right? One thing I would suggest is to do research with a professor. So for example, if you're in Stanford and then you take a classes from, let's say, Chris Manning, then perhaps you can reach out to him to do research in NLP, right? But also there's other platform for you to show your skill as well, or even learning in this case. Think about platform like Kaggle, right? I'm sure many of us are familiar with this space. Like many Kaggler actually probably get their job through that platform because they show that they are capable, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that if you're a bachelor or undergrad student, then you are not able to break the industry. Yes, it is harder, but it's not something that is not possible. I mean, it's possible to basically get a job in this field if you're dedicated. I think I've seen or known friends that are in undergrad studies that did a lot of research, way more than I am. And I think I was like, whoa, how can they did all this research by themselves, right? So I think all in all, it's just depending on like how convicted you are. Like if you're serious about it, then I'm sure you can get a job. So I just went into the full circle, but back into, I guess, my tips and advice. I would say also, like, on top of what Olive and Kevin said earlier, I think another thing is to think about from the business perspective, right? Whenever we do some sort of like model evaluation, we always think about accuracy, or we think about some sort of metric that we try to optimize best, especially in a school setting, because that's the goal, especially when you're in school. But I think if you're able to think of it from different angle, like think about, if we identify the false positive more, how much money you could save for the company. So I know it's hard to do that when you're not at work, but I think you can always come up with some sort of hypothesis and then try to validate that through your modeling. So that's definitely like one piece of advice that I have. What about the do's and don'ts? So I'm pretty sure I did a lot of don'ts during my career, but what are some do's and don'ts that you would give to someone that's just started in data science? I'm gonna start with you, Olive.
I think the answer is also changes over time. Like this is true. I think what the do's is that I really like this phrase of fail fast. So try a lot of things, try a lot of different algorithms, try out different kinds of projects, or even in your career, try different teams, different industry to give yourself an opportunity to expose more different content. And I think these are the do's because maybe at some point you find yourself like liking uh, a particular subject, for example, be NLP. But if you never tried it or explored it, you don't know that you have a passion about it. And then, or also like as by trying more, you actually gain experience, and also throughout this journey, you may end up developing your expertise in a subject matter. And I think that's the one do's. And then another do's is that I think don't be afraid of failure in terms of maybe model training or finding applications for it, because we have to admit that applying data science is still a learning curve in a lot of business, while maybe in the tech industry it already pretty mature or somewhat mature. There are still a lot of new industries that are still exploring data science options. So as a data scientist, I think we should not give up in the faith of like using data science, applying this to understand the problem, maybe through building a accurate model, maybe pushing for accuracy, precision, or building a model to help understand the business, maybe through understanding variable importance or drivers of the models. But I think the core here is the belief in using data science to help understand the problem better, and that's the do's like that would drive you with passion to push forward. Because at dark times where your model does not work, or there are things that just like seems to have huge leakage problem, what do you do? And these are the thoughts that will carry you through to stay innovative and stay like passionate about like this field, I would say. Yeah. And
Awesome.
for don'ts, I can mention one. For don'ts, I would say don't stop networking. That's like the word networking can be intimidating to a lot of people. Like, do I have to go to cocktail parties, or do I have to go to conferences? I think the type of networking can come into many different forms. Here we have a platform where like all of us meet through a platform like Nike, and I would say this builds up your network, and later on you get to learn more about what others are doing, and also maybe different methods of doing things through this data science community. So I would say like don't stop networking. Yeah.
That's awesome. What about you, Henry? What is your do's and don'ts as a data scientist?
So for me, I think for do's, I think it's most of the time better to have a simpler model that works and addresses all the business needs. It doesn't even have to be models. It can be simple dashboards. It can be simple anything that addresses business problems than to have something more complicated that no one really understands and no one can really maintain. So that's something that you always want to start thinking about when you jump into a data science problem. Try to figure out exactly what needs to be done and try to execute it as simply as possible. And for don'ts, I would, there's nothing I can really think of right now. I know, I feel like
Okay.
all have mentioned a lot of things. So
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, what about you, Kevin?
That's okay. I mean, I can help you out here. So for do's, I'm also gonna write off Henry that. So I think simpler models are great, especially simple models that can explain how each variable or feature affects your outcome is great, because then you're really able to communicate how like your system is affecting the outcome. And this is especially important for, I think, engineering companies like GE, where you may not necessarily want the most complicated model, but simple models that have good explainability. So I would say that's a great start, along with Henry's comment that it meets business needs. And for don'ts, this is where I come. I think it's important to start building, start having something that works. So like this is where the simple model comes in again. Sometimes you might spend a lot of time just like figuring out, oh, how this work, like how does learning more about your data, like specific data domain, or just, oh, what is the best model you research forever. But I think it's just you should just have something, just make something upfront like a week, and then keep iterating to improve. Otherwise, you might get stuck in like the initial discussion phase too long and not have the project move forward so much. So yeah, that's what I was saying. And network. At the end of the day, I think network matters a lot.
Yep, that's awesome. So just to piggyback in all of you guys' comment, I think for me the do's definitely, yeah, I think if you have the attitude of like failing fast and able to not getting like ticked off by trying, let's say there are a lot of times where you try, let's say 100 different models, 100 different approaches, all of the 100 fails. That's normal. Like in data science industry or data science approaches, that's very normal. And probably like your 101st experiment will be successful. And if you're the person who gets like angry or gets like turned off because you're failing so many times, I think it's quite hard to survive in the industry. I think you have to have a lot of patience in trying out many different things. Essentially, data science is boiled down to try and error, right? Based on what you know as well. I think for dons, definitely like, I think this is what I saw in the industry as well. Like, if you don't know something, just say you don't know something. And what I meant by that is, it's okay to feel uncomfortable about the subject that you don't know about. That would actually drive you toward more learning. I think in the earlier career of mine, I felt like I'm giving the perspective of like I know it all, I do it all. But I think like the more I work in this industry, I felt like the more you feel uncomfortable about the subject, I think that's how you get better. Because the moment I feel like, oh, I don't know much about this, let's say topic in natural language processing, the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna study more on it. I'm gonna try a different model. I'm gonna try to read up in Kaggle, try to read up in Medium Post, try to get myself better, right? And then so next time when I meet with my colleagues, then I can talk to them and say, hey, you know what? Now I know it. But it's okay to say you don't know, because there are like your peers probably would help you and probably give you resources like, hey, maybe you should check out this link or this research paper or this Kaggle post that will help you understanding the topic. So
I have one point to add.
Sure, go ahead.
Just now when you mentioned about model training, you said that there like you may have tried numerous, like maybe hundreds model, and it does not work. I think one thing to add is that experience helps. So through experience, you are more strategic in maybe troubleshooting what are the possible reasons that it's failed, and also maybe building up skill sets to like here are the multiple ways that we can validate results and identify where are the shortcomings of the model, and or just your through training or what have you not done right. So I think experience helps, and that's why if you get started, I think that would help. And I think it's an important point to just to mention.
Yeah, that's definitely right. I think like I remember when I first started in this journey, like I remember building my first, I think it was XGBoost random forest model and trying to do hyperparameter tuning. I was like, well, for each of the parameter, there's like it's a wide gap of like what parameter, like what kind of value you put in between. But then as the time moves on, as you experiment more with hyperparameter tuning, then you figure out, oh, okay, for maybe the max depth of this tree, usually I go from this number to this number because that's what I find best throughout most of the work that I did. So I think that definitely helps a lot. So maybe I think let's touch on one thing, like what kind of misconception have you heard about around this field? I surely heard many, but like maybe I want to start with you first as well, Olive. Like any misconception that you want to clear out a little bit on this?
I think that's misconception is also my biggest fear, that you need a computer science degree to enter it and become a data scientist. And I think that has been always a very uncomfortable topic because I did not started my undergrad or career that way. But throughout my career, I realized that this is definitely a misconception because data scientists enter the field from all kinds of like majors or experience. I have heard someone with a neuroscience PhD degree, and then they jump into data science. Also, like chemical engineering, all kinds of backgrounds. Data science is not very limited to just having a computer science or applied math degree. And yeah, want to share that.
Awesome. What about you, Kevin?
Wow. I was actually going to say the same thing. So I was going to say you don't have to come from the traditional like CS or stat or the ML or math background, like for example, like Henry, because it's something. It's like it's a skill that you can learn and you can apply to your domain knowledge. So actually, if you have another background coming in, that could become very useful should you decide to go to that field. So for example, if you're let's say a linguist major, right, linguistics major, you might be like, how is this coming in any handy? Well, guess what? NLP deals a lot with how languages form, how it's used. So that your linguistic background can be great if you decide to go into NLP. Or like I think even myself, like the engineering background, I thought, oh, it's so like, how does it help? Like, there's hardly any coding. Well, I think depends on people, but I mean, for example, it gave me a really good understanding of manufacturing process or like how, for example, engine works. I know basic, definitely there are engine experts out there, but basic engine like structures and or even like mechanics or how sensors work, and it really helps when you look at the data. Be like, oh yeah, that's right. So just like Olive said, I think you can come from any background. So just be prepared to work hard and learn the necessary skills and programming and stats and whatnot, and you should be good to go.
Awesome. What about you, Henry?
For me, I think I'm gonna take a step back and talk about just data in general. When most people, I mean, it seems like a lot of people want to get into data science because that's what they've been hearing a lot. So they think data science and then they think everything from data engineering to research scientist. So I think it's worth looking into. I wish I'd had done this earlier, but looking into exactly what kind of roles are within data. So there's people they're software engineers, there are data engineers who kind of help with the data pipelining. There's data scientists, and even within data scientists, it ranges from experimentation all the way to like feature generation and modeling. There's ML engineers who actually help productionalize a lot of the models that's being built. There's applied scientists who are focused on applying the state-of-the-art machine learning from like research journals, etc. And there are research scientists who are writing those journals. So it's worth exploring exactly what you're interested in, what you want to get into, before you just think everything is data science. I'm going to become a data scientist.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a perfect segue of what I was about to say here. I think when you look at the job listing, especially for data scientist role, you will see a bunch of skills that you need to know, right? I remember the first time when I was looking for a job as a data scientist, I was like, whoa, I barely know half of the stuff that's listed in the role. And I think like as what Henry mentioned earlier, I think it really depends to what are you interested in, because even within data scientist role, there are so many variants. So think about experimentation, think about computer vision field, think about a data scientist that's integrated in the business. So you're sort of doing both data analyst job and data scientist and also product manager role at the same time. So it really depends on like what you're interested in, and I encourage you to talk to as many professional in this space as much as possible. So let's say if I'm want to find a job, let's say at Nike, definitely I want to talk to different teams at Nike and then see what their data scientists doing on that team, because it could be very different from one team to the other. For example, one team could be doing a lot of operation stuff, another team can be doing a lot of marketing stuff. So it is quite different of work. So I think definitely like that's one of the misconceptions that I heard previously, where data scientists just know it all, right? yes, we know in general know most of the things, but I think once we get more project, we'll go deeper into that specific subject. So maybe like let's talk about a little bit about interesting project that we have all worked on before. Doesn't have to be something that we work on, at a company, but anything that you found interesting. Yeah. So let's start with you, Olive, if you have anything to share.
Sure. So there is one interesting, I would say like data analysis work that I have done before through like previous interviews that I learned a lot because so the data itself it's using the Kaggle's beers review data, and the data has a few columns like numerical values like smell, fragrance, and then also like aroma. It also includes some fields like the comments of the beer review, and it's a considerable size. I would say like over a million rows of beer reviews. And the part of what it interests to me is that there are a few tasks. Some of them are trying to look into like what are the weirdest beer, and then there are also ones that trying to understand what are the candidates of best beers. Throughout there, I saw on Kaggle that many people have different approaches in doing in approaching a problem, or that's why we say like you have many ways to skin a cat. So I learned a lot because you get to see how others are approaching it, and I also myself took a step in maybe training some new unsupervised learning models like I applied a Gaussian mixture model, which I have not previously used it. So I think these are the projects outside work that I really uh, I have the opportunity to explore new algorithms or apply things that I am not familiar with, which gives me the opportunity to know how to know about the package, know how to tune it, know all the like interpretations of it. So I would encourage anyone to maybe just pick up a Kaggle data set and start working on it. Yeah.
Awesome. That's definitely sounds interesting. What about you, Henry? Is there anything that interesting that you work on previously or like currently at least?
So nothing current, but I guess a few months back there are a couple of things that I worked on. Like right now I'm interested in graphical neural networks, so I've been interested in doing text classification using graphical neural networks, so using convolutions. I didn't even know there were convolutions within GNN, but that's what I found out. And then, yeah, so I was looking at Yelp reviews and then trying to figure out the PMI between a word and the sentence, so the document, and also just word embeddings of each of the words, and then those are all represented within a graph. And I was able to do convolutions to figure out to kind of predict whether a review is like a good review or not such a good review, etc. Yeah, so that's
Awesome. What about you, Kevin?
First of all, I think that's pretty cool, Henry. So one thing I can talk about is related to sports analytics. So for example, if you're a fan of NBA, and you would like to know if you can predict career win share of a player based on their rookie performance, to a single rookie performance, and see how that goes. So you can there's a website that collects all these stats from like number of minutes played, the point score for that game, like free throw percentage, 3-point percentage, etc. So you collect all these statistics, and you can just build a regression model to see how this player will perform out throughout his average performance of the player's career. And even with a very simple model, you could get pretty accurate, which was very shocking. And one thing we did was of that year's top rookie players, we matched them with we found another player from previous year who were most close to it to see what the player could become. So like, for example, Luke, like a center might become more like Kevin Love or something like that. So yeah, so some sports analytics project that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds super exciting.
Yeah.
I think for me, actually, I would like to attribute it to, I guess, one of the first project that I did in this space. I'm sure all of us have done this, use this data set from UCI about the wine classification type of data set, right? From the thought of it, from the surface, it sounds very simple, right? You're just given like features from the wine, the acidity, and then also all the different features to see, whether it's, so the data is very open-ended. So definitely you can make it a classification problem whether the wine is good or bad, or the rating of the wine, right? So I think just through that one small exercise, I think I was able to explore so many different models, from clustering to classification to regression, to the tree model. I think I was able to expose to so many things, even though the project itself is very simple. And I think one of the most important part that kept me going is once you sort of finish with the analysis, don't be afraid to share it. Like I write blogs from time to time about it. Not because I want to be famous or anything, but I think it's more of like sharing your learning and keep yourself accountable. When you accomplish like a blog, I think it's like a sort of some sense of like satisfaction that, oh, I did this, and then I put it out there for people to critique or to share or to suggest anything that they have. I think like within the data science community, I think definitely everyone is open to critique. Nothing is perfect. So I think that's also one way to sort of like better your skill. So I think definitely like for those who just started, like one thing they're interested about is the interview process, right? Maybe, I'm sure all of us have done plenty of interviews here. Maybe can you guys share some thought about like, what the interview process looks like for each of you? Maybe it's different, maybe it's the same, but let's start with you, Olive.
Sure. So for the standard interview process, usually it starts with a HR screening phone call, and then you may, if everything goes well, you may proceed to the next step. Depending on different companies, it may comes with a take-home project where you work on it in a given time, or some of them they are not time constrained. And then sometimes it also goes to like manager uh, uh, route where you would talk to your hiring manager. And then finally, it usually ends with a on-site interview, meeting 5 to 7 different team members to evaluate on different sides of your skill sets, from communication to technical, or to even like scripting language. I think that's pretty much the high level of interview process. I can leave the rest for like Henry and Kevin to talk about.
Okay, why don't we start with you as well, Henry? Has your experience quite different than what Olive has mentioned earlier, or is it quite?
I think it's along the same lines, but I think it really depends on, again, the company, the type of data scientist, etc. Yeah, so you can expect anything from like coding, to actually doing analysis, to just technical interviews. You might also be tested on SQL. So yeah, I think it's worth just reading about when you have an interview with a certain company, reading about exactly what they do in their interview process, because it can be very unique from each other.
Yep. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think they covered the ground pretty well. One thing I would add is, in my experience, they've also asked me to sometimes present my project in a presentation format. And that's both to see how well you can answer, how well you know your project, and how, like, the technical aspects of it, but also to test how you can communicate your results, which is very important, and how you can frame that to be useful to the business. So this again goes back to having a good project really helps, where you can kind of make this into a nice presentation and talk about like what you did, what you learned from it, and how this can be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be
Things to
awesome.
think about.
Yeah, I think
Can
for
I add
me,
something? Oh,
yeah, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. This is very, very random, but one thing that I found out was that if I like the projects that I do in my internships, or like projects that I do under NDAs with other companies or with professors who have NDAs with other companies, you should definitely be careful about what you mention during interviews, because data is very like, I mean, it's a valuable asset for a lot of companies, and the insights are valuable assets for a lot of companies. So I recommend doing a lot of like Kaggle competition, playing around with Kaggle competition data sets, etc., because those are all public and you can definitely mention everything about that data set as well. But I'll be careful when I talk about my projects that I have NDAs on.
Yeah, that's definitely a good advice. I think for me, I think you guys pretty much like lay out all the interview process. I think for me, one thing to strengthen yourself on is on the coding on the whiteboard, or you do a live coding. I think many people tend to think about, oh, coding on the laptop is the same as like coding in the whiteboard. I've done numerous interview, and like myself to another interviewers, also getting interviewed. I think one of the, I guess, thing that I saw is that some people can be very good at coding in a laptop, but when it comes to whiteboard, they tend to get stuck. So I think just make sure you practice a lot before you're heading into the interview. So I think that's a nice segue to the next sort of question I want to talk about is, what exactly is the best way to prepare for an interview? I know earlier Henry and Kevin mentioned a little bit about Kaggle projects. I know like it's quite broad in terms of like how you should prepare for it, but in general term, what kind of I guess like feedback that you guys have in terms of the how to prepare for an interview? You know, start with you, Olive.
Sure. In terms of preparing for interviews, I think all of us come from different backgrounds, so we have different strengths and weaknesses. So before actually doing any studying or preparation, I usually put together an Excel sheet looking into the maybe a laundry list of potential areas of data science topics or skill sets that maybe usually will be commonly evaluated. That can come from maybe I would recommend going onto LinkedIn and just search 10 different data science job listings and see what kind of skill sets they're looking for. What are the scripting language they're looking for? What are the types of maybe models they have mentioned or skill sets? And then you start your preparation from good research. And then I think based on your strengths and weakness, you can focus on different areas, because some of us may be stronger on coding or stronger on statistics or machine learning, and try to cover a breadth first, and then maybe then focus on smaller ones with the depth, because usually you are working with finite time, so it's not possible to review the whole textbook again. But being strategic on covering the breadth first, and then maybe some specific depth based on tailoring to the company, I think this is a very good strategy to get you mostly covered.
Awesome. What about you, Henry?
I would always look around you. For me, I think I was kind of fortunate to be in a master's program where everyone else was also looking for a job in data science. So I was able to do like practice rounds, bounce off concepts, like even finer details, like what are like some of the tunable parameters, like what would you look at first before others, etc. Those are like finer details that you can only get when you actually work with models, or when you have people around you who've worked with those models. So I'll definitely look around you for other students, or like if you're in a PhD programs, other PhD students, etc. Also, I think you can expand your network by going to meetups. So I've been to not that many, but like maybe 10 or so meetups in Chicago in ML or data science. You can definitely meet like like principal data scientist from like another firm, etc. And then he can give you a really good insight to what they're currently working on, what he thinks is the best models or the best way to deal with data science problems, etc. And I think those are valuable insights that you can also share with your interviewer during interviews. So,
What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I give, since everyone already said all the all the good stuff, I'll just give a more practical advice that you should practice a lot of SQL before coming in. That's one thing that they kind of expect you to know. So if you don't pass that, it's hard to move on. So something easy you can do. You can just go online, find a bunch of practice, and do it. So that would be a good start.
Awesome. For me, I guess I can share it from a more practical perspective. So I think first, definitely try to reach out to your network or even someone on like a data scientist that work at a company that you want to apply to in LinkedIn, for example, and ask them like, what is the, you can, have a coffee chat with them or something, just to ask them what is the interview process looks like to begin with. And then also, like do a lot of searching through Glassdoor, through your friends that have interviewed there in the past, to see, what kind of interview process looks like and what you need to be strengthening on. I think also another thing is, Lead Code is a really, really good website to go. By the way, I'm not sponsored by Lead Code. I'm just saying that I'm sure all of us have been to Lead Code to practice a lot of SQL problem, like what Kevin has said, as well as like a lot of algorithm problem, especially if you work in that field that's close to algorithm, you're most likely being tested on algorithm, such as like runtime and designing like a better algorithm. And also I think being able to, like, I know when I first started, I was like Google data science interview questions, right? And I know it's kind of cheesy to say it, but I would say like once you kind of Google that particular line, you'll see a lot of like different questions. But I think I can share the link later on too. But there are roughly about 150 questions that sort of like question you a lot about machine learning concept. Think about what exactly is classification, or what exactly is precision or false positive, all those like foundational things that you need to know to be strong on for sure. Just like Kevin said, if you're not strong in your foundation, it's hard to move forward to the next interview process. So you have to be super strong in that area. Then I guess the next one I want to talk about is, now we have talked about the interview process. What about the resume, right? I think as a student myself previously, or at least currently is a student, how should we like structure our resume? Especially, I mean, the way I think about it, there are multiple side of coin, right? There are some students that perhaps doesn't know about Kaggle, they haven't done a lot of projects. How should they structure their resume? And for those that have been, just competing a lot in Kaggle and then have been done a lot of internship, I think for the one I just mentioned, definitely they have an edge since they have done so many projects. But for those who just started, doesn't have a lot of projects there, doesn't have an internship, like, what is your suggestion in terms of like how should they structure their resume? Probably want to start with you first, Olive.
Sure, I'm gonna steal the thunder. Don't blame me. I think when I first started with not a lot of experience, what I how I structure my resume, like coming from my personal experience, is that I focus on experience than my education, because your education, there are not much except like maybe a degree or major, but in terms of experience, that can add a lot of colors and context about what you have done. So you may not have a lot of project experience, but you do have a lot of free time. So I would say maybe use that space on your resume to feature one of your personal projects. Maybe just take a free Kaggle data set and then work on it, and then put your insights on there. I think that shows give a lot of colors and also talking points in during the interview, when maybe a recruiter or the interviewer would like to ask you for more details. And that gives also, I see it as a way to show your personality or what kind of skill sets you're good at. Like, are you passionate about maybe beers? and then you may do a peer review, work on a peer review data set. I think it's not simply just a resume, but it also tells more about like your personal interest as well. So use this opportunity to not only show your experience, but also what you're passionate about.
Yeah, that's definitely well said. What about you, Henry?
I think it, I think it really depends on how experienced you are as a data scientist. If you do not have that many experience or relevant experiences, I would try to like compile all of them and put them all in the resume. If you have extensive experience as a data scientist, I would kind of tailor your resume to towards like different roles within data science as well. So if it's experimentation, maybe relevant projects that are, I would expand on the relevant projects that you have done in the past that are more geared towards experimentation. If it's modeling, etc., computer vision. Yep, and also just if you have recognition that you definitely want to have on your resume, like Grandmaster of Kaggle, I would always put that on the top. Yeah.
Cool. That makes, what about you, Kevin?
Sorry, I'm just gonna say if you're Grandmaster in Kaggle, I think that's kind of all you need. I would gear. Let me give a more practical one for like, complete beginners or novice. I would at least focus on putting the right keywords like Python, R, SQL, Tableau, AWS, Azure, whatever you want. Like as long as you know, so you can at least, so when they screen, they can at least hit those keywords. Now, granted, you should know something about them, but it's important to literally place them on your resume so that you can pass that automatic filter should the company decide to do it. So, quick practical advice.
Yeah,
I think that's super key. Yeah, and also like since you mentioned Tableau, I think it's worth to mention Alteryx as well. Although I don't think any of us are sponsored by them, but to provide the spectrum of different tools in data science. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think for me, definitely, I would say like one piece of advice that was given by, I guess, like my peer before was that create a website. I think your personal website, you can create in GitHub. It's free. Okay. So it's not. It doesn't. Sure, it will take a little bit more time to create a website, but I think as a way to sort of block your progress or even like showing what you have done previously. I know if I try to screen someone like their resume, the first thing I look for is whether they have a site or not. Usually if they have a site, that's like a plus for me, because I was able to see like what they have done in the past, and if they do link to GitHub, that's like a plus for me. Especially I can see like how they write their code and how they think through the problem. Because I think as an employer, if you try to hire someone, it's hard to gauge if the person is knowledgeable about the subject if all I can see is just the word in the resume, right? So I think having like if you can create like a personal website, that's definitely a good way to go. I think another thing is I guess what Kevin mentioned earlier. I think being able to put those keywords there is good. But I just want to caution one thing. I think if you're, for me, I'll never put I'm an expert in Python or expert in R, because if I do that, I'm just telling the recruiter saying like, oh, ask me the question in Python and R because I'm an expert. And then if I'm happen not to be an expert, then that's definitely backfire, right? So I think for the language that you're more comfortable about, definitely like you can put like, okay, you know these languages, but for those that you have exposed to, I would say like basic knowledge, at least you know some of it, but you're not expert of it. So I think that's definitely, couple tips that I'll put in my resume. One last thing I want to note, I think when you submit a resume, I think one of the things that happen is that if you don't match the keyword, oftentimes you get essentially like your resume just go into the dark and never seen again. I think being able to quantify your work. So let's say you create the script that save X amount of money or X amount of hours, or you did this project in Kaggle. As a result, you gain the accuracy of like 0.91, for example, and then leads you to top 3 in the ranking. So that's also definitely helpful, I think, when someone looks at it.
Oh, can I add one last thing?
Sure.
During interviews, I think one of the things that I enjoyed listening to is like new tools that I've never seen before, like being used by candidates. So let's say like an interviewee has used like a light GBM, for example. Like, I mean, people know about light GBM, but it's also definitely not as widely used as something like XGBoost. So if I'm like, it's my first time hearing about light GBM, I'll be very interested to hear more, etc.
Yeah, definitely. I think like if you do list something that you know about in your resume, like make sure you really know about it. Like if I say I listed a project and say, oh, I did this and then I use this method and then I get this result. Oftentimes as an interviewer, that's the first thing I want to ask. Oh, what you did in the project, like what method did you use? How did you validate your result? I think if you go into the interview like without much knowledge of what you just wrote, I think that usually backfire in terms of like whether you get hired or not. So I think know what you write in your resume well. I think that's the piece of advice I would give.
Right.
So maybe one thing I think for someone who just started in this field, like, do you guys have any suggestion? Like, if there's only one course to take to get them start with, right? Which course would you suggest on top of your mind? I know that's hard, but like, let's try to keep it, more practical. So let's start with you, Olive.
I can go. I have one
Okay.
thing in mind.
Sure, go ahead.
I'll give. Can I give 2 suggestions? One, if you like a book, I would read Introduction to Statistical Learning or just elements of statistical learning. Either of those 2, depending on how much background you have. The second one, if you like listening to course, I would definitely watch How to Win a Data Science Competition on Coursera. Yep, those 2 would be my suggestion.
Okay, now back to you, Olive.
Okay. I think it's hard to boil down to one, but one that I find it the most inspiring was something that I am personally interested. So I'm very passionate about experimentation and have quite extensive experience in experimentation. And in an Udacity course on A/B testing, I find it super interesting. Because this sparks my interest into the field, and also it gives me the vision, like, okay, what can I do with it? And I think that's the courses where I wouldn't say like, yes, there are like 10,000 courses you can take, like from machine learning to I don't know, like deep learning, statistics, all kinds. But then pick one that interests you, maybe from the topic or from the brief introduction of the course, and take it to just make data science fun for yourself. And I think that's the part where I find it, oh yeah, you can do this, you can test about it, and that's the cool tricks that you can do. And I say that's like, I don't know if this is the one course, but then it will be definitely a course that I will pick based on that criteria.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your perspective. What about you, Kevin?
Oof. I'm gonna pick a not a well-known course. It's just I think intro to ML that I took at Tech was very helpful because it gives you like a good overview of like how to split your data into train, validation tests, to like different models, to evaluation metrics. So I think that one course just gave me a really good foundation. And after that, if you're interested, you can dive into specific topics if you want. If you want to learn more about, I don't know, computer vision, then you can take that as a subsequent course. So I think any intro ML course would be nice from Coursera.
Yeah.
Or your preferred method of learning, whichever, like a book's fine too.
Yeah, I think for me, definitely, if there's one course that I can pick, it's definitely that the machine learning course by Andrew in Coursera. I think like I'm sure like all of us have taken that course, and I think like that course will sort of gauge your interest. Like if you're really interested in this space, like for me when I first took that course, and then I figured okay it's interesting, then it leads me to another course which is like a deep learning afterward. Um, so I mean I don't want to make this sound like cutthroat, but I think after you take the course, then you have some sort of I guess feedback to yourself, like is this something really what I really want to do or not? So it definitely helps, and I think follow up on another thing that we mentioned earlier is once you take those foundational courses, for me I'm a believer of like don't pay for anything. I know that sounds really bad, but MIT and Stanford actually like they sort of like publicize their courses for free. So just for example, currently I'm taking one of the NLP course with deep learning by Chris Manning in Stanford. That's definitely like public. So definitely you can take it, and then they also have the syllabus and everything there. So you can pretend yourself like a student in the class technically, especially during the pandemic time, right? So so definitely you have more time to do things like that.
Oh, I think if we frame it the other way, it's like there are a lot of open source online courses that it's not only available within your keyboard fingertips like YouTube, like
Yeah.
Coursera,
Yeah.
and then Udemy, and I just heard a lot of different open source platforms, and then also course material. So rather than saying it that like we are free riding, I think the knowledge is here, and it's where like you go to pursue it. So also maybe to Mario's point, there are also other sites like Towards Data Science, maybe KD Nuggets or 538. All these sites are free. Yeah, like all these are free websites for you to learn on your own. Yeah, just to provide the variety of learning here, not just restricted to one site. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add something real quick. I actually wanted to share. So we're having a lot of like casual PPLs here, even though none of us are sponsored. But this guy in YouTube called 3 Blue 1 Brown, I'm sure you guys know, he has really good videos to explain stuff visually. So I think it's a really good supplement, supplementary material to complement your course or whatever you're doing. It doesn't have problems or anything, but it gives you an intuitive way to understand how neural networks work, or how to imagine things in 3D or something like that. So yeah, you can look them up.
Yeah, definitely.
I've never heard of it.
It-
Can you put like a subtitle on the bottom or something?
I'll give the list. I'll put the link.
I think Mario, you know, right?
Yeah, I know. It's actually a well-known.
Yeah, he's a pretty well-known guy. Yeah.
I think another thing that I want to mention that was actually introduced to me by my ex-manager at Nike is there's a data scientist called David Robinson. Like he's I think quite famous in this space, and he does like a weekly. I guess like there's a thing called Tidy Tuesday where people will upload like a data set weekly, and then he will analyze it in R, and then he will basically question the data set, like what is interesting, or how from the question that or hypothesis that he come up with, then he does some kind of like data manipulation to get the result. So I think if you don't have a lot of like experience in the industry, I think it's good to watch that kind of video to give you some perspective of what kind of problem you can answer with the question with those data sets.
And also
Mhm.
never ever dismiss anyone dismiss using R, because I think a lot of people have really strong opinions about Python versus R, and I think a lot of people who are entering the space, they might say, "Oh, Python is like the way to go." Like, but if you mention that during interviews, it might not turn out so well. So I'll be very careful. Yeah.
Yeah, your interviewer might be a very strong fan of R, and that might not be the way to go.
I think it's a like such a debatable topic, and it's always like there's endless debate about it. So I think instead of us choosing one, let's stay open about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think I remember. I don't know if Kevin actually experienced this when I took this. I won't name the course of the class that I took at Georgia Tech while I was on campus student. But I remember near the end of the term, the professor has a slide that says Python is a king. So essentially, when I see that, I was like, okay, are you dissing the other R community or something? So I thought that was quite interesting. I think to me, when we talk about Python versus R, it all boils down to what tools you use to get the work done. It's not so much of like R is better or Python is better. I'm sure people have different opinion on that, but like um, for me, like when I compare Python and R, I think R is definitely better in terms of the visualization, or you try to do a data exploration. Mainly because I'm sort of biased toward ggplot in R, because you can customize so many things, right? Which makes R great, and also you can pipe through the data set to do cleaning and stuff, which makes it better. I think for Python definitely is more widely used now in the industry, just because a lot of like software development or even like DevOps and all the different role within the data science industry is using Python, which is why people highly encourage to learn Python to begin with. But I wouldn't discount R because a lot of statistical model that lives within R is not yet available in Python, although Python has catch up quite a bit since then. So I would say like, just learn I guess the language that you feel comfortable with. I'm not sure if you guys feel any different, but feel free to share your thought.
No, I think you said it well.
Cool. That's what I like to hear. So I guess another thing is, I
Last
know
question?
not necessarily last question, but I
Okay.
think one of the interesting thought that
Can
I
we
have
make it
is
last question?
okay.
Yeah.
Maybe about like I think the company that we'll be applying to. I know when I started, I applying the company. I think the first thing that I considered was that which industry that I want to go in, and within that industry, which company that interests me the most. So I can talk a little bit about my experience when like coming to Goat from Nike. At the time, I was applying to. I think my goal was to go to startup, just because I worked in corporate for quite a bit already. I think at the time, like I was thinking, well, I think first of all, definitely location matters. Because if you want to go to tech industry, most of them lives within California, especially in the Bay Area. For startup, definitely can see some shift toward more Southern California, like Los Angeles, for example. There's even a website that I can link on the bottom too later on. It's called Build in LA. Essentially, all the startup posting there. You can see, what kind of benefit they will give you, and then basically what kind of role is available, and then what kind of. I think for me, what attracted me the most is the benefit and also the size of the team. The reason I sort of chose Goat is because I think first of all it's startup. Second of all, the team I'm in is quite a small team, so I get to work on different variety of projects, from marketing to operations to customer services. So there's definitely a lot of different things to expose myself to. But what about you guys? Do you guys feel like if you are applying for data scientist role, it has to be tech industry, or can it be something else as well?
During
can
the
go first.
pandemic,
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
just anywhere that takes you.
Okay, that's a
yourself.
fair point.
Yeah.
I think maybe if I reframe the question a little bit into saying that what are the criteria that I would look for as I apply for a data science role? I think what I look for, Mario mentioned the major ones, maybe industry and also a location. But another thing that I feel like as uh, coming out from school, I did not realize that this matters quite a lot in terms of the work that you do. It will be the size of your team in terms of like the data science community within the company that you are joining or you're interviewing. Just because smaller teams like maybe startup type of teams or just companies that are ramping up in their data science capabilities, you may wear multiple hats, being a ML engineer to data scientist to data analyst in one day or one whole project. You do a lot of things, and that give you a lot of experience to get your hands dirty, but then not necessarily meaning that you have a lot of support or like maybe mentorship because of the small team size. But with a larger team, you may gain a data science community and also maybe mentorship through that. But at the same time, also there may be some trade-offs in terms of the breadth of the project and also the type of role that you may be solely focused on one small piece of training the model or feature engineering. So I think in short, the size of the team actually is a pretty important factor in determining the type of work you do as a data scientist. So do like make a mental note in your interview to maybe ask as a follow-up question at the end of the interview to ask about like what's the team size and what kind of work they do to give you a good sense of the actual day-to-day work of the data scientist.
Yeah, that's definitely good advice. What about you, Henry? What are you looking for when you're looking for a company to apply to?
Salary, location. I don't know, like to be like very, very honest, I think
Yeah.
compensation, location, I guess like the type of job you'll be doing. And I think the one thing that matters like the most is like the people that you'll be working with. But I think it's also hard to tell when you're interviewing. So you can't really decide based on that unless you know someone personally who's on the team, etc. Then I would definitely prioritize people over everything else. But yep.
What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, same. I think at the end of the day, I mean, if you choose the field that you're interested in, so I mean, whatever that be, it could be fashion, it could be tech, it could be manufacturing, whatever. But people's, I think, one of the most important, if not the most. So when you're interviewing them, they're interviewing you to see if you're a good fit, but you're also interviewing them to see if they will be a good fit for you, right? So don't be afraid to ask questions that's important to you to see, you know, if it makes sense for you to join the team. So I would really take advantage of that process to also get to know them and see if they will be a good fit for you as well. Yep.
Yeah, I think one thing I would like to add on top of that is when you apply to a job, you need to know like what you want to accomplish within a year, for example. If I go to this X company and then they are not able to provide that for me, providing that the post-COVID time. So I think knowing that what you'll be getting within the 1 year time frame will be super helpful. So for example, let's say this 1 year I want to focus more in the computer vision space, right? Maybe I should apply to a company that solely working on that specific topics. So that will help you become a better data scientist in that space. So with that, I just want to kind of end with can each of us just give some sort of maybe like a closing note or like or advice or anything that you think you haven't like made a remark yet to those that listen to this I guess like this chat here. I want to start with you first, Olive.
I don't have much to say except like I think all these questions Mario put together are great. I would say thank you, Mario, for giving us this panel opportunity to share, and also I think all of us should be available on LinkedIn. So I would be open to anyone reaching out for questions because I myself also reach out to others for questions as well. So don't be shy to do that. Yeah.
Awesome. What about you, Henry?
Yeah, I'm on the same note. I also got a lot of help during the way in becoming a data scientist or like software development engineer, etc. And I would always like to help people if they're also seeking similar help. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. Unless this video goes viral, I'll probably be able to answer most of the questions.
All right. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, same. don't be afraid to ask for help and reach out. I mean, even if it's for networking purpose, but also just if you have technical questions. So I think stay curious and open to interact with other people. And yeah, also thank you, Mario, for organizing. I wanted to say that for sure. And everyone else, it was it's a nice occasion to get together.
Yeah, no worries. I think one thing I would like to add is I know sometimes I do get discouraged by going through the courses by myself because it's tough. Like people get distracted quite easily. So I would say sometimes maybe you can go like cargo out of platform and say who is interested in taking this class together, and then I think that also helps you in general because I remember like when we were interning at Nike, like especially Henry and myself, like we would read like a research paper and then discuss about it. I think having someone to talk to about this kind of thing that you studying is helpful rather than just you trying to internalizing yourself. And yeah, as always, I'm also open on LinkedIn. Yeah, unless this goes viral, I'm hoping to help as many people as I can as well. And yeah, feel free to put in any comments of like what you want to hear next in the future videos. We'll try to accommodate as much as possible. And I'll also put the link of everything that we mentioned previously on the description as well. So feel free to reach out to us. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, Mario.
All right,
Thanks,
thanks.
everyone.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.